You are listening to the Hero's Journey podcast. I'm Dan Zarzana.
And I'm Jeff Garvin.
Let the journey begin.
Welcome to the show.
In this podcast, we examine classic and contemporary books and films through the lens of the hero's journey.
If you are new to the podcast, welcome to it.
Yay!
We encourage you to dig back into the catalog, starting with episode 0, in which we introduce the idea of the hero's journey.
This is episode 3, The Handmaid's Tale.
Spoiler alert, we will be discussing The Handmaid's Tale in its entirety. So if you haven't read the novel, please pause the podcast now and enjoy one of our other fine episodes on your drive to the damn library or a fine bookstore near you.
Why you get all hostile about it?
Read books, man! Sorry, I'm very preachy today.
The Handmaid's Tale was originally published in 1985 by McClelland and Stewart in Canada, which became a part of Random House in 2011.
I think it's important for us to talk about the story a little bit. I think probably fewer people have read The Handmaid's Tale than, say, have watched Die Hard.
Because The Handmaid's Tale is on school reading lists and banned book lists as well, that is a shocking...
Right?
We're just guessing that that's the case.
I think
based on popular culture trends.
I had never read it, and it came out in the 80s.
That is true. I had not read it either.
So The Handmaid's Tale is a dystopian novel set in a future America in which a patriarchal theocracy has arisen in the wake of some kind of population crisis. And so the women are being completely subjugated because the focus of society now is to have more babies. Something like 1 out of 4 babies is a viable human being. And so the men have just locked it down, almost like a puritanical society.
Yes.
And our main character is of Fred. All the women are named as essentially belongings of the wealthy, powerful men to whom they are assigned.
Yeah, if you insert the word property in front of their names.
Yeah.
Property of Fred, property of Glenn.
Yeah. So
That's terrible.
It's a dark story, and unfortunately, it's very relevant to conversation in 2017.
When I was reading this, I was thinking, man, it's a good thing that this couldn't really happen. But then I started realizing that we're at risk.
And the way it ends, too, I think is particularly disturbing. We're going to have a conversation. We're going to try to focus as much on the hero's journey as we can, although it's an extremely unconventional story in the way it's told and its structure. But there will be places in this podcast where we can't avoid discussing the relevance to modern society.
If you thought Die Hard had anti-feminist veins, Jeff.
Oh, boy.
Welcome to The Handmaid's Tale.
So The Handmaid's Tale has been made into a stage play, a ballet, an opera, a 1990 film starring Natasha Richardson, Faye Dunaway, and Robert Duvall. And then, of course, most recently, a Hulu series starring Elizabeth Moss.
For which she won 2 Emmys, one as Outstanding Actress and one as producer of the show. So congrats to her.
I found the book so rich and complex with material to analyze that I did not watch any of the film versions for fear it would befuddle me as I was trying to dissect this book.
Right. I had a very difficult time analyzing this book within the hero's journey myth structure.
Yeah. Well, it might be worth saying that we put this off a month. This was going to be our December episode, and we looked at each other and said we need more time.
Yeah.
I'm a big audiobook fan, and I saw that Claire Danes had narrated the audio version, and I was all over that. So I listened to the audiobook version and was so disoriented by it that I listened to it a second time, and then I bought the book on Kindle so that I could read through it. It was great on audio, but there are definitely things about this book in particular, the way it's written and printed and the way there are quotation marks sometimes and not in others. It's really a print book. Not to take anything away from Claire Danes and Audible, but it definitely was worth reading in print. I'll say this, The Handmaid's Tale is clearly a masterpiece of dystopian literary fiction. I mean, it's right up there with 1984 and Fahrenheit 451, but with a necessary and unique ingredient that it is entirely from the point of view of a 20th century woman. a voice which is searingly absent from this genre.
Can I just say that how stunned I was when I started reading that first page? That first chapter is like a little 2-page quickie, and she's talking about being in a gymnasium and on a cot, and she can still see the floor is painted like a basketball court. When I picked up this book, I thought we were reading something that took place in some kind of a feudal or medieval period. The title, The Handmaid's Tale, harkens back to Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. The cover art of my copy, and of the only copy I'd ever seen, I know there are other versions of the cover art out there, but the only one I'd ever seen is this one of this large brick wall that dominates the image, and then there are 2 handmaids in their red dresses and their white winged cowls. There's nothing modern in that image. Based on those 2 items, I thought this was a fantasy.
Interesting.
Not a future dystopian story.
Interesting.
So I read basketball in the first page. I'm like, what is going on?
I found this book really difficult to read, both from the standpoint of pleasure reading and through the analytical lens. And I think it's for 2 reasons. One, there's a lot of time jumping in this book. The novel covers at least 3 different periods of time. The time before, which is, before this totalitarian regime takes power, life at the Red Center, and then life at the commander's house. And then the other thing that made it difficult is the narrative voice, which is profoundly beautiful and poetic, but at times it's a bit rambling. And at other times, it's unreliable, and self-admittedly so. I mean, Fred constantly tells us that the book is a reconstruction. That's to say that she recognizes the flawed nature of her own memory. But she doesn't apologize for it. And for example, when she's sharing her first quasi-romantic encounter with Nick, she describes it one way, and then she says, that's not really how it happened. And then she describes it another way and says, that's not really how it happened.
That's probably not how it happened either.
And then she admits that she's not sure how it happened. And while I recognize how real and authentic and gritty that is, it definitely hampered my enjoyment of the story. Even though it's part of what sets The Handmaid's Tale apart, I'm not convinced that particular tool was the best way to tell this story.
Interesting.
But I was just going to say, when I say that, I say it with a qualifier, which is Banksy is one of my artistic heroes. He's a street artist and philosopher. And one of my favorite quotes about art is he said, art should comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. And this book definitely disturbed me. So it did its job. And our job that we've given ourselves is to analyze this through the lens of the hero's journey. So I'm going to do my best to stick to that from now to the end of the podcast.
I really enjoyed the book. The problem I had is that I got caught up in reading it as a pleasure read. I didn't make notes or anything the first time, so I had to read it a second time. I did watch the first 5 episodes of the Hulu series. I resisted doing it, but last night I thought, you know what? I might as well just go for it.
You binged them last night?
So I binged 5 episodes. It is entirely different in tone. The structure is similar. She flashes back to the time before and the time with her lover and then husband Luke and the daughter. They name the daughter. They name Alfred. You find out the first episode what her real name is. One aspect of the novel is that you never know what her real name is. But they call her out as June at the very first episode.
I mean, I can see how that would be important in a TV series where you're trying to really visually demonstrate what's been lost. Well, should we jump into Act 1?
No, I don't want to.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to do this, Jeff.
Can we do the drinking part? All right, so I guess I want to start because I feel like I need to qualify the way I analyze this. More than anything we've done so far, this was difficult to pin down these moments of the hero's journey. So in order to make sense of this complex time-jumping narrative, I've broken my analysis into 3 timelines. The main one being life at the commander's house, the secondary one being life at the Red Center, and the third one being the time before. So as I dive into these different sections of the hero's journey, I'm going to call out aspects of the journey as if those are 3 different stories.
I went a different way with it.
Awesome.
We'll see whether
we'll see who wins.
We'll see whether it pans out for me. I interpreted Offred's present day as the world of common day, and I struggled mightily with, is the time before Offred's world of common day and the Republic of Gilead period is that the special world.
Right.
And man, I struggled so much. But you had said you wanted to start, so go ahead.
We'll dive in, because I think sometimes in this podcast I end up locking out your sort of thing. So dive in.
I think that the memories that she shares of the time before are ghosts. They are experiences that relate to the present day or the Gileadian period. In the Gileadian period, everything is told in a first-person present tense. Mm-hmm. All of the memories and whatnot that she shares about the time before and about the Red Center are all past tense. Mm. One of these memories of the Red Center indoctrination, Aunt Lydia, the aunts are a caste of women who are tasked with training
indoctrination.
These women as handmaids. Mm-hmm. So Aunt Lydia says, ordinary is what you are used to. This may not be ordinary to you now, but after a time it will. It will become ordinary. At a shopping trip, Offred and her shopping companion of Glenn, all the handmaids travel, when they're in public, they travel in pairs, always. They pass by the wall, which is a large red brick wall upon which hang the corpses of people executed for crimes against the state. Mm-hmm. Very often crimes against reproduction. There are abortion doctors hanging from there. There are what they call gender traitors. Mm-hmm. And they're just hanging there as a warning to everybody.
Yeah.
Pretty brutal. They call these salvagings, these executions. She says, there must have been a men's salvaging early this morning. I didn't hear the bells. Perhaps I've become used to them. And then later, when Offred is at the commander's house, she refuses to refer to her quarters as my room until she very shortly thereafter refers to it exactly as my room when she sees the commander in the hall outside. And she says, was he in my room? I said mine.
Right.
Okay, my room then. This is her new normal. That's why I think this is her world of common day.
It's probably important to reiterate that the world of common day, or the ordinary world, is where we see our main character in their status quo daily life. So I broke it down into Red Center, Commander's house, and the time before. So at the Red Center, we learn that Offred is 30, 5'7", brunette. And I think it's important, we don't learn that until page 143, almost halfway through the book. And that is because Atwood is unraveling this as if Offred were writing to herself, not to anyone in particular. And so there's no, in reality, you don't have to say, hey, dear diary, I'm Jeff, I'm 5'9", 100, you just don't write that way.
We don't even learn Offred's name until page 84.
Yeah, it's an indication of how atypical this book is in terms of telling a story in chronological order. We're just thrust into this woman's life with little explanation or exposition at all. So first we're introduced to the Red Center, the gymnasium where the handmaids in training are sleeping on a defunct high school campus. In my opinion, you could say that the ordinary world is her life at the Red Center being indoctrinated, waiting to be assigned to a commander. So then we have the commander's house, which is, as you explained, this is the main thrust of the story. We experience most of the story as Offred telling about her life at the commander's house. She lives in her plain room. Everything is suicide-proofed because the handmaids, a lot of them commit suicide. She has her superficial interactions with the Marthas. So the handmaids are specifically trained to breed. Their whole job is to get pregnant.
Trained?
Well,
I guess.
Trained is the wrong word, but they're indoctrinated into this belief system that it is it's
their duty.
It's their duty to let themselves get pregnant. So they're not married. Their whole function is to be vessels.
Right. And they go from commander's house to commander's house to commander's house. And either after a given period of time or until they bear a child for that commander.
And they get 3 chances. And after 3 chances, they get assigned to the colonies where they are mine workers or field workers, and they're exposed to radiation. Their lives become forfeit.
They're slave labor at that point.
So then there are wives who are the wealthy women who are married to the commanders, and then there are the Marthas who are kind of like servants, but they're not handmaids.
Right.
So she has her interactions with the Marthas and her shopping ritual, and that's how we're sort of introduced to the neo-totalitarian economy of Gilead. They have their nightly news / prayer readings, and then they have the impregnation ceremony, which is again part of
weird.
Part of her ordinary world at the commander's house is this weird thing where the wife sort of lays down, and then the handmaid lays down on top of her.
On top of the wife.
So it's like this very strange.
And the commander mates with the handmaid who's lying on top of his wife, who.
Yeah.
Oh, yay.
Yeah. So we learn, as part of this ordinary world sequence, Ovfred is not the first handmaid to come to the commander's house. We also learn that this is Ovfred's third and final placement. We learn that the commander's wife is jealous and warns Ovfred not to come between the two of them. And then we also learn that the commander's wife was Serena Joy, a famous religious figure who now resents having to live the sort of pious, submissive life that she once fraudulently modeled for the women.
She was a gospel singer.
Yeah. The ordinary world of the time before is Ovfred, or whatever her name was, is with her husband Luke and their child, and she has this job converting books to disc. And that's sort of her ordinary world in the time before. And all of this, again, is revealed throughout the book, not in chronological order. And I both enjoyed the reality of how that unfolded, and as it might in a journal, and I was also really challenged to find these elements. So that's ordinary world. Call to adventure. So in the call to adventure, the hero is presented with a challenge which renders her unable to continue living in the comfort of the ordinary world. And now that I've separated this story into 3 timelines, I'm just going to zap my bullet points as quickly and clearly as possible so we can have discussion. At the Red Center, though it happens off the page, we assume that there's a moment when Ovfred is summoned, like, hey, it's your turn to go to the commander's house. So that would be the call to adventure in the Red Center portion. At the commander's house, I think this is the key call to adventure in the book. Nick tells Ovfred that the commander wants to see her alone. And then in the time before, she's just going through her daily life. She goes to the 7-Eleven or whatever to buy cigarettes, and her CompuBank account number doesn't work. And this is the moment where she's invited to confront the changes that are going on.
Symptomatic of my struggle with this entire analysis.
Yeah.
I've got a great big question mark next to my call to adventure because I'm still not even sure. Although you alluded to it a little bit when you said that at the Red Center, a handmaid's call to adventure is when she receives the posting to a commander's house.
Right.
So in terms of life at the commander's house being the ordinary world, in terms of the way I viewed this path for her, her delivery to the commander's house, driven by a guardian. The guardians of the faith they're middle-class
dudes. They have some kind of agency, but they don't have the privilege of having a handmaid assigned to them, and they're not allowed to go breed.
They're not permitted a wife because they're either seen as defective in some way, or they're too old, or they're too young, or they're too stupid, or whatever.
Or just not rich enough.
They've just determined that you're not worthy.
The ruling class...
You're going to drive the commander around.
The ruling class is protecting their assets by trying to have all the babies.
Yeah, if a handmaid does bear a child, that child immediately belongs to the commander's wife.
Right.
And the handmaid is then transferred to the next commander's house.
Right.
They do not get to raise their child.
And in that way, in the same way that lower class people are often pitted against one another in history, the women can't be united because you're either a wife or a Martha or a handmaid. And if you're a wife, you hate the handmaid for being a sexual object. And if you're a handmaid, you resent the wife. And if you're a Martha, you resent the handmaids for having the privileges they have. So it's just divide and conquer.
Very effective.
Margaret Atwood understands the psychology of theocracy and puritanical governments so well. It's disturbing. Refusal of the call is when the hero or the heroine, confronted with fear of the unknown, refuses to take on the challenge. And sometimes this energy is expressed by the heroine herself. Sometimes it's expressed from without. At the Red Center, we don't see Ovfred refuse the call. It's off the page. But she makes it clear throughout that she's an unwilling participant in this scenario and that she would escape if only she had the courage. At the commander's house, after Nick gives her the commander's summons, the commander wants to see you alone, immediately after that scene, she goes back to her room and she remembers her husband, Luke. And she knows he's dead, but she wishes he were alive, and she has this elaborate fantasy of being reunited with him. And that fantasy is her form of refusal, because she really doesn't have any agency. She knows she has to meet him, but she's rejecting the reality with this fantasy. And then in the time before, after her CompuCard is refused, after the new clerk who's replaced a female clerk says, yeah, your account's closed, she denies that there's a problem. She calls the bank hotline, like, hey, why isn't my card working? She's refusing to recognize that the special world is upon her, and it's the patriarchy.
Dang.
Do you have a refusal of the call moment?
At one point in the story, Offred has a doctor appointment, and the doctor offers to help her get pregnant, suggesting that a lot of the commanders are too old, they're sterile, which in this society is a forbidden word.
Yeah, it's taboo.
So the doctor offers to impregnate her. Now, I think we're not talking about in vitro fertilization.
Nope.
He's looking to get a little action.
He's using his position.
He's absolutely is, because he's probably not eligible for a handmaid himself.
Right.
Offred is afraid. Is this a trap?
Mm-hmm.
Is the doctor an eye? The eyes are the secret police of the Republic, and they're everywhere. And
right.
Anybody working in any capacity could be an eye.
Is this some kind of a sting operation, and they're testing her faith, and she's
Exactly.
going to say yes, and then he's going to go, ha-ha, you're under arrest.
Exactly. And then, it's to the wall for her. So she says, no, I can't.
Interesting. So, yeah, I can see how that is her refusing to participate in the birth economy, essentially. She's refusing that whole energy.
She's running out of time.
Yeah.
Like, as you've stated already, this is her third assignment.
Yeah.
And her previous 2 assignments did not bear fruit, to use their terminology. He's offering her a way out, because once a handmaid bears a child, then they are relieved of the fear of being branded an unwoman.
They're immune.
And being sent to the colonies to basically die.
This doctor represents the most disturbing part of the book to me, which is that there really are no pure men. Every male character in this book, even the ones who are less nefarious, are on some level enjoying their leverage in this patriarchy. The most profound one is after the totalitarian regime takes power and Offred's bank account is seized,
Luke.
She wonders, is Luke enjoying this? He's suddenly being patronizing. Is that real, or am I just imagining that? And that's the one thing she wishes she could ask, is was I right?
Yeah,
and
because he says, "Don't worry, I'll take care of you."
Yeah,
he's not outraged that this is happening. He's saying, I got your back."
Yeah,
but she doesn't want that from him. She wants him to be angry and to fight for her.
Yeah, she wants
for her rights.
Exactly,
to help fight for her rights. But she wants to go protest.
Yeah,
and he says, "No, it's dangerous. Don't do that."
It was really uncomfortable as a man to read that and go, "Is that me? Is that how I would behave? Would I suddenly become the protector instead of the equalizer in that situation?" Probably what's most powerful about this book for me to read it is that it's like a reality check. Where are you with your privilege, and how do you relate to it?
Yeah.
And where would you stand if they came for your wife's bank account?
That got real.
It got real. Hey, we laughed. Meeting with the mentor. The heroine receives counsel on how to operate in the special world, and sometimes our hero or heroine receives supernatural aid, which is the unexpected assistance that comes to one who has undertaken their proper adventure. At the Red Center,
this one's tough.
I would say that Aunt Lydia acts as a mentor, indoctrinating the handmaids, including Offred, here are the rules of the special world. We have very little information about this population crisis. We just know that 75% of all babies are non-viable when they're born. And so in order to, quote, solve the population crisis, this, post 9/11 world happens where personal liberty is sacrificed for security, which is a situation our generation can certainly understand. It has parallels that are gross. So that was Red Center. At the commander's house, I actually identified the doctor visit that you just talked about as a mentor meeting, because he's trying to give her, hey, it doesn't always happen in the way they're telling you it happens. Sometimes women get pregnant in other ways. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of an icebreaker to the Nick situation.
Yeah, okay.
In the time before, after the bank accounts are frozen, Moira comes over, and Moira is almost gleeful in telling her this is how things are and it's been a long time coming. And it's funny because Moira's speech about how this is going and why the patriarchy wins and how she's going to essentially connect with a bunch of other gays and form essentially like a commune and hide. It reminded me of the reaction of people of color on election night last year.
Oh.
Because almost every person I know who wasn't white was like, oh, you're surprised that we're racist? Oh, you're surprised that we elected this president? And so it was interesting to me that she almost predicted that. People who were already marginalized, there's no surprise there for them. It's like, it's just your turn. That was a disturbing mentor moment and parallel with 2016, 2017. The other thing is that her mother, Offred's mother, tells her about how things were when she was a kid. And she literally says, you young people don't appreciate things.
Right.
We fought for women's rights, and now you take it for granted.
Right.
Oops.
Right.
And in an eerie way, her mother warns her about how things are going to be, only they get much worse.
And how about a mentor at the commander's house? I've got one.
Tell me.
Previous Alfred.
Ooh.
Who scratches the Latin phrase nolite te bastardis carborundorum. This is a mysterious, almost otherworldly phrase that's been scratched into the wall of her closet.
And how disappointing when she does find out what it means.
Yeah, it still applies
Yeah.
to her. It's still kind of a fight song. And in fact, in the television series, that's exactly what it is. When she discovers the meaning of the phrase, the end of that episode is Alfred and a handful of other handmaids walking down the street almost in formation, and she says,
Nolite de bastardes carborundorum, bitches.
No.
I thought that was pretty funny.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to have to watch the show because that's tonally just seems totally out.
Oh, it's completely different tonally. Yeah.
Okay, I got to watch it then. Crossing the threshold.
I considered the visit with the commander when Nick says the commander wants to see you in private.
Yeah.
Just you, which is forbidden.
Right.
Alfred knows in this society, the handmaid is never permitted to be alone with the commander.
Right, because sex is only for procreation.
Right, and they want no temptation.
Although we find out later that that's bull crap.
Hypocritical like everything else.
So crossing of the threshold is the heroine must pass a barrier to enter the special world, and the crossing represents their commitment to the adventure. So at the Red Center, the crossing of the threshold would be she leaves the Red Center and enters the commander's house, literally crossing the threshold into the commander's house.
That would have been the crossing of the threshold for me, but
yeah,
I don't know. It just seemed so trite.
Trite sometimes. I mean,
I was embarrassed to say it.
Oh, apparently I have less pride than you do. So at the commander's house, to me, the adventure here is her journey into no longer being a conforming victim of this society, going from a passive passenger on the train to a member of Mayday, of the resistance.
Yeah, great.
So she meets the commander in his study and plays Scrabble and kisses him.
Not the way he wants.
Not the way he wants. But she has some choices in that scene. They're all bad. She goes in, she plays Scrabble, which is forbidden, right? It's forbidden to be alone with them. It's forbidden for her to play with words.
Right.
And of course, a kiss is forbidden.
Yep.
Right after the kiss, she remembers seeing this Holocaust documentary and the interview with the concentration camp survivor's mistress. Alfred remembers the makeup the woman was wearing and how thick her makeup was, and she crams her hands into her mouth to stop from making this sound. It's like a laughter, a cry. It's just some explosion of emotion. And this fake date with the commander is more of a violation to her than the breeding ceremony because it cheapens her memory of romance and relationship. She can't even have that. So not only is she just a vessel for reproduction, but now even love, romance, dating, courtship, all of that, she's being used for someone else's pleasure. This is going to sound stupid, but it reminded me of this scene in Pretty Woman where Vivian, played by Julia Roberts, tells Richard Gere that she does everything but kiss on the mouth. So she's a prostitute and she'll sell sex, but not intimacy. And in The Handmaid's Tale, Alfred is doomed to give up her reproductive rights to a man. But what the man really wants is intimacy. And she has to give him that too. And so that to me is the real sickness of this violation, is that the real crime perpetrated on Alfred is that she can't even keep that private place of love. Even that is something that she's being used for.
Wow. Okay. At least she has the opportunity to use the commander back a little bit.
Yeah.
This is kind of a power play for her.
Yeah, but I mean, she gets hand lotion and cigarettes. It's like...
that's true. It's trinkets.
Yeah, it's like if you play along with your sex trafficker, you might get beat less. But it's all downside.
Wow.
So in the time before, Alfred and all her female coworkers get fired from their jobs, and Alfred goes home to Luke, who promises to take care of her. And now this is the crossing of the threshold. Now she's in the special world of the new patriarchy. And that chapter ending where she wonders whether Luke enjoys his new power, that we just talked about, that was really poignant. That's what I see as crossing of the threshold. Let's take a break, and we'll be back with Act 2. So normally we wait until after we've finished Act 2 to present the drinking, but I don't know. Dan and I were talking on the break.
This is some serious material.
Yeah,
and I'm feeling tremendous gender guilt.
Oh man!
And this is the saddest I think I've ever been on any episode so far. I need a pick me up.
Yeah, I think we're gonna insert the "What are Dan and Jeff drinking now?"
Yeah,
so that we can try to have a little bit more fun.
Try to loosen up for Acts 2 and 3.
Discussing the soul-crushing theocratic patriarchy.
Oh God!
In a fun way.
Yay! All right, so I always hand you a bag, so you can't see what's in it, and then hope that it's a good surprise. So far, they've all been good.
They've been astounding.
Can I tell you how incredibly difficult this one was?
Everything hurts. This book hurts us.
I may have to narrate it a little bit if you don't get it right away.
Okay, well, give me the chance.
Here's the back. Oh, yeah, I'll shut up.
Habit. Cabernet Franc. I get it.
So it is a red wine. And all the handmaids wear red. They have to wear red.
Boom.
There's also, it's called Habit.
Yeah.
And I thought the label art of the white hand reaching for the red was very oppressive.
And they also described their outfits as habits at one point.
How do you feel about wine? I know you're not a big wine drinker.
I need education. I'm ready.
All right.
Do you have a corkscrew handy? I want to drink it. It's too hard to get to it.
So far, we've had a beer and 2 whiskeys, which I think are your preferred beverages. So not only is this book oppressive and depressing, but you don't even get to have an alcohol that you like drinking. You have to drink wine.
At this point, I'll do it.
Okay. We should just drink out of the bottle.
Yeah.
Let's just go straight for it.
Do you have a straw? While you're pouring your glass.
Talk about the color and whatnot while I'm pouring mine.
It's a deep, deep purple, as though a very anemic person had been stabbed and then bled into my cup.
Yeah, that's what Cabernet Franc is.
Is it really?
Yep.
Poor Franco.
Marco.
Franco.
People who haven't listened to the Die Hard episode have no idea what just happened.
It smells like grape juice to me. It doesn't smell like wine. It's like grape juice.
You might say that it is fruit forward.
Can I drink it now, or do I have to keep talking about it?
You can drink it. I will say it's very young. This is a 2016, and it is 2017 right now. So this is really young.
It doesn't taste green. It's quite smooth.
Green?
It doesn't taste green. Yeah, you know how when you get a green kind of a wine, it bites at the sides of your tongue?
I have never heard green used in that way.
Oh. I was on a wine tasting tour, and they talked about certain wines being more green. They hadn't aged.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, I get green as in young and inexperienced.
Maybe that's what you mean by young. It tastes good. I like it. Give me your analysis. Is it difficult and disappointing?
There's this weird sensation of, it's almost like, oh, this is going to be astringent, but then it goes away.
Yeah, you can taste freedom, and then the door is slammed on you.
Bring it down a notch, man. I thought we were going into the drinking segment already to feel a little better about things.
It's not kicking in yet.
Oh, I have another bottle. Damn.
Yeah. All right, well, we're gonna drink our Cabernet Franc, and we'll be back. Welcome back. We're going to dive into Act 2. The first portion of Act 2 is called Tests, Allies, and Enemies, or The Road of Trials. Now in the special world, our hero makes allies, meets enemies, and must pass a series of tests to prove their worthiness. Dan, what do you got in the allies column?
From the time before, if I follow your model, Moira is her best friend. They went to college together, kind of help each other weather the beginnings of the patriarchy.
Yeah.
Moira in the red center becomes a symbol of resistance for Offred and the other handmaids. She fights against the indoctrination and at one point is the architect of an escape. She dresses herself as one of the ants and disappears right out the front door and is not seen again until she's seen again.
Until she's seen again.
In the commander's house, Ovglen is one. She is Offred's shopping partner.
Fellow handmaid.
And Ovglen reveals herself to be a member of Mayday, which is a resistance group that is organizing escapes for various...
It's like the underground female railroad.
That's what they call it at the academic symposium that's at the coda of the book.
Right.
They call it the underground female road.
You're right.
Nick is kind of a shapeshifter. You don't know what to think about Nick.
Yeah.
He's friendly to her. Our introduction to Nick is Alfred leaving the commander's house to go on this shopping trip with Ovglen, and Nick winks at her, which he's not supposed to do. He's not supposed to interact with the handmaid at all.
Right.
Later on, when she comes back, he speaks to her. He says, "How was your walk?" He's not supposed to talk to her. Is this a test? Is he trying to trap her?
Right.
But later on, toward the end, we see that he is, in fact, an ally.
Well, hang on. We don't know that for sure.
I think we know that
we
for
don't
sure.
know what happens once she gets in that van. But
I think we do.
I think the thing that's disturbing about the book is that none of the men that we meet are monsters. I mean, Nick he has what he has and he's doing what he's doing.
Nick, I feel like Alfred, is kind of a victim of the situation. The commander, while he may not be outwardly evil, he is a symbol of oppression.
Well, that's
he
what I'm
is
saying.
one of the architects of the patriarchy.
They're all symbols of oppression, but what I'm saying is that she even talks about it at one point in the book, and I wish I had the quote to hand, but she basically talks about how no one's twisting their mustache and evil. Everyone's just sort of a normal, relatable person riding their part of the boat. And if there had been a character who was like for example, if you take Suzanne Collins' Hunger Games, if there was a President Snow, openly cruel and divisive, it would be easier to go, oh, this is a fantasy and those are the bad guys and these are the good guys. But it's just all these people are they're responding to the pressures around them, because it's not like the commander can just go, you know what, no, I'm gonna liberate you. No one has those choices. So I just, that makes it more poignant to me.
Yeah, and the commander does say at one point, we thought we could do better.
Yeah, he definitely he definitely believes in the rhetoric. I agree with you about Nick, of Glenn, certainly Moira. I would add Cora.
Yeah, I've got her with a question mark.
One of the Martha. She's sympathetic to Ovfred's plight, and she helps her with little things.
Right.
And then I think there are two others that are complex.
This should be interesting.
I don't think they qualify as pure allies. I think they're shapeshifters, but there is some ally energy in there.
Okay.
And I think it's important to talk about them because it's what makes this book morally complex.
If you say Serena, I'm going to drown you in dirty socks.
Okay, Serena. She shapeshifts. At first, she's a threshold guardian, literally standing in the doorway saying, you can't come in until you understand the rules. She also pays Ovfred for these services. So she becomes, really as much as anyone else in the book, somebody who gives her boons, gives her more freedom. It's not an ally, but there's ally energy in there, and then she shifts to an enemy by the end. And then, I know this is called Allies and Enemies, but I just want to add another shapeshifter who I don't think is an ally, but the commander's a shapeshifter, because he provides Ovfred with perhaps more of a human existence than she would have had on her own. I mean, if Ovfred toes the line and the commander toes the line, she's going to have a really sparse experience of life. But he provides her with some pleasures, playing Scrabble, a kind of a sense of romance, escaping to go, have drinks and smoke cigarettes, and
gives her books to read.
But as you pointed out, he's also a conduit of the patriarchy, oppressing her and using her. There's nobody in this book that's purely good. Enemies. So I think at the Red Center, it's Aunt Lydia and Aunt Elizabeth. They're somewhere between enemies and threshold guardians.
And
they are the
mentors.
Yeah, but they're
complicated.
But at the end of the day, they're the tools of oppression, indoctrinating these women and stripping them of their humanity.
Yeah.
Janine, the pious pregnant handmaid, also known as Of Warren. Her pregnancy evokes envy and spite in Ovfred, and her subsequent failure and her meltdown creates danger for the other handmaids. Remember, she kind of loses her mind at the Red Center.
Right.
And Moira has to kind of slap her into...
Not kind of.
Literally slap some sense into her. At the commander's house, I would say the Eyes, the religious police of Gilead, are an enemy. They're the constant threat.
Right.
And then the guardians at the barrier. At one point, Ovfred and Ovglen are going shopping, and they have to cross this checkpoint, and the guardians check their passes. And it's a really interesting scene where Ovfred kind of semi-flirts with the Guardian and she enjoys her sexual power over him and imagines later he'll have to, take care of himself, imagining.
Even though that's forbidden.
Right. So this is like the first hint of Fred being a rebel, which is exercising the tiniest bit.
Tiny defiance.
And then in the time before, I would say the enemies are the new government.
Right.
The guy at the liquor store who won't take her card. He's kind of almost the herald, I would say, of the bad news.
Ooh, nice.
We haven't used the herald.
Is not an archetype we have discussed yet.
The herald is the bringer of the news.
Extra, patriarchy, read all about it. Not the commander.
I didn't say the commander.
I think he is. He's the one in power.
One of the things that sets this book apart to me is that it's very realistically not black and white. The enemies here are ideological and institutional. To call the commander an enemy oversimplifies his function in this machine. But it also...
He's the local representative.
Yeah, you're right.
That.
It also removes accountability from him. He certainly is a bastard. He is one of the bastards that grinds her down. Yeah. So what's the word? I don't even know the word because I'm such a cocky bastard. You win. He's an enemy, is what I'm trying to say. I withdraw. I
secede. Acquiesce.
Acquiesce.
Concede.
Yeah, I concede.
Okay.
That's such a hard word for me to say.
Tests.
The Road of Trials. In my opinion, Road of Trials is a more apt name for this part of The Handmaid's Tale. Because you pointed out Fred doesn't have a lot of agency, so it's not like there's test, you passed it, test, you failed it. She spends most of the story being a victim or a witness. And that's not to say that she doesn't take action. She does, but most of the tests don't end with her proving her worthiness to be in some special world.
Yeah, a lot of what she does is not reacting to stuff.
Withholding. Yeah, there's one quote that I think pertains to this section. Aunt Lydia says there's more than one kind of freedom. There's freedom to and freedom from.
Yep.
In the days of anarchy, it was freedom to. Now you are being given freedom from. Don't underrate it.
Yeah.
Possibly the most nefarious idea you could insert into the minds of young people who are being oppressed.
Yeah. I think I've already talked about Nick's early interactions with Fred.
The wink.
Fred wonders if those are tests.
Most of her decisions are paralyzed by this. Will I get caught? Will it mean the wrong thing?
Right.
And that's part of the psychological assault of this regime, is that the rules are so strict you don't know when you're breaking them.
I feel like the early interactions with Glenn are a test. She feels that they are a test. They meet each other on the street corner as they're going on their shopping trip, and they have their pre-approved greetings and responses. At that point, we're informed that handmaids travel in pairs, not for protection, but to spy on one another.
Yep, because you never know who that person's talking to. It's all about accountability and isolation.
And then the doctor offering to impregnate her.
Yeah.
That was a test as well.
At the Red Center, just the structure of the center and the way the handmaids are indoctrinated. Will Fred follow the rules? This is a test. She talks after bedtime. She pretends to need to go to the restroom so she can talk to Moira. So it's testing her purity, and clearly she's not pure. She's not a believer. Moira's escape and the stress and scrutiny it causes of Fred and the others, I think, is another test. At the commander's house, Glenn says Mayday to Fred, testing to see if she's a member of the resistance, and she's not yet. On a shopping trip, she encounters a group of Japanese tourists, and she remains properly humbled and assures them that she is happy in her life. But the truth is, she knows she's being watched.
I found that sequence really confusing and surprising, that this patriarchy would allow, when they so strictly regiment the lives of every single citizen, that they would allow tourists in what we would now consider modern garb. I mean, there's these young Japanese women wearing short skirts and heels, and something that the women of the Republic of Gilead are completely forbidden to wear. Even to the point where Fred says, I used to wear stuff like that, but now seeing these Japanese tourists dressed like I used to dress, they look scandalous.
You were picturing Gilead as more like North Korea, closed.
Isn't it? If that is your ideology, why would you allow outside influence to come in and pollute?
All speculation, but my answer would be money. Book a flight and go visit Saudi Arabia and see women who are seeing your Western garb and are experiencing that cognitive dissonance of, I could dress like that, but it's culturally offensive to me. we don't get a lot of bigger information about what the economy of the world is like, but these tourists are really the only moment of awareness that it's really just the United States that's become Gilead. It's not the rest of the world. There's democracy and freedom and expression elsewhere.
Yeah.
Which I think, coupled with the sort of coda that you referenced, that academic symposium, is an indictment of fundamentalism in America. Margaret Atwood saying, it's not like this everywhere.
Right.
It's just like this here. And by the way, I'm Canadian, and I'm writing about America. The first breeding ceremony is a test of Fred's submission to the patriarchy. The second ceremony is a test to see if she can keep control as a usurper, because the commander tries to touch her.
Yeah.
And she keeps cool. So again, she's being tested by Serena, by the commander, she has no room to move.
Yeah.
Janine's birthday is another test.
That's two words, birth day.
Janine's birthday, where she gives birth to what becomes what they call a shredder.
A shredder, Jeff.
Yeah. Oh.
Shredder.
Yeah, not the Shredder from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but a baby that will be shredded.
Yeah, and I found myself wondering if that is reference to what actually happens to them, or if that's just a nasty slang term for a baby that will be disposed of.
I will say this.
Did they turn it into Soylent Green?
As difficult as this...
Soylent Green is babies!
As difficult as this episode is, as we're having this conversation, I'm really appreciating this book on a deeper level. And then during her second date with the commander is another test. He gives her an old-fashioned magazine. And this is kind
Vogue.
of... Right. And this is kind of to see a test either how pure is she or how committed is she to breaking the rules. This is a clear line you're crossing if you read this magazine. And of course, she devours it. The thing that I love is you don't get the impression that of Fred in the time before was the kind of woman who would have read Vogue. She would have read literature.
Yeah.
But because it's all she can get her hands on, she consumes it. Of course, another test of Glenn invites of Fred to join the resistance.
Yep.
In the time before, this is where the story gets murky for me, because we see bits and pieces of the time before in flashback, and there are some I could interpret as tests, but I think they serve the larger story better as parts of the approach. So I'm going to leave them there. In fact,
interesting.
I find that the line between tests and approach to the Inmost Cave particularly hard to draw in this novel. So I'm looking forward to our discussion here. Maybe you can bring some clarity to my muddled mind as we reach the next stage. Approach to the Inmost Cave. The heroine reaches the edge of a dangerous place where the object of her quest is hidden.
I think I took it way too literally. The ceremony is the first, I think it's the first step. It's this horrible, sterile, and procedural ceremony. Later, Alfred is sitting in her room at night. She can't sleep. And she decides she wants to steal something from Serena's sitting room because she needs to feel some little tiny piece of power. So she sneaks out of her room at night. She goes downstairs into the sitting room, and there's a flower arrangement. And she decides she's going to steal a daffodil and press it.
Yeah.
And hope that the next handmaid finds it. While she's there, she senses a presence in the room. She turns around, and Nick is there. Mm-hmm. At first, she thinks, oh, I'm caught. But Nick grabs her, and they kiss. And at that moment, contrast to the ceremony with the commander, which is it is literal sex, but there's no romance in it at all.
Sure.
She is completely dissociated from her body during that experience. Nick grabs her and kisses her, and she's just filled with desire.
Yeah. All that repressed sexuality.
He's been flirting with me a little bit. He winked once. He's trying to chat me up a little bit, like he's not supposed to.
We've already seen her kind of flirt with the Guardian, so she's clearly there's this bubbling energy underneath that's not being satisfied.
Right.
There's no outlet.
Then, as of Warren or Janine's birthday, where we learn that because Janine has given birth to what is believed to be a healthy baby girl at the time, she is now saved from being an unwoman and being sent to the colonies. This reminds of Fred of the reward of carrying a healthy child to term.
Interesting.
Which I thought all of that led to the first date with the commander. which I interpreted as the ordeal.
Interesting. Let me chime in with my approach.
This is so strange.
Yeah, it's weird. There's not a lot of
that the two of us have so completely
such divergence.
Different.
Yeah. We usually overlap a lot, and there's very little overlap in our analysis.
It's like we didn't even read the same book.
If this was an English class, our teacher would be pulling her hair out.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Sorry, Mrs. Brotman.
But we would both be wrong.
Yeah,
sure.
for absolutely. Although I think we've certainly been able to justify our beliefs, and I think that's all you want. Okay, so in order to make sense of this, in addition to breaking it into the 3 different time periods that I've already talked about, I really dug into Campbell and Woman is Temptress. At the Red Center, Uvfred recites the Lord's Prayer, and when she gets to temptation, she starts having these thoughts about what temptation means. And there's a quote, "At the center, temptation was anything much more than eating and sleeping. Knowing was a temptation. What you don't know won't tempt you," Aunt Lydia used to say. So the temptation for her is knowledge of the outside world, of experience outside her cloistered life as a handmaid. As she thinks of the chandelier that's now gone in the commander's house.
Why is it gone?
Because the prior handmaid hanged herself. And she thinks of the temptation of suicide. And then there's another moment. Janine loses her and Moira slaps her back into reality. And Uvfred realizes that this madness is a fate that could await her. She also realizes that Moira is planning to escape the center. Moira says, "In case I'm not here, here's what you do next time Janine freaks out."
Yep.
And Uvfred goes, "Oh, she's going to leave." And so there's that temptation of escape. At the commander's house, the commander asks Uvfred what she wants in exchange for her continuing visits. And she says, "I want information.
Yep.
I want to know about the outside world."
Know.
So now she's giving into that temptation.
Yeah.
And that's when she finds out her predecessor hanged herself. Another temptation, Uvglen gives her the password, Mayday, inducting her, tempting her into the resistance. Will you join us?
Yeah.
And then Serena Joy, another temptress, Woman is Temptress, Serena Joy asks Uvfred to sleep with Nick in an attempt to get pregnant and thereby save them both.
Right.
In exchange, she offers Uvfred a cigarette and a picture of her daughter. So here's knowledge or experiences outside your cloistered life as a handmaid and a remembrance of the past. All of that is sort of prelude to the commander takes Uvfred to Jezebel's, the sort of party whorehouse.
Wow.
When she goes there, she meets Moira, and she sees how far Moira has fallen. Moira's lost hope. She's resigned now.
Yeah, she's completely broken.
Yeah, she's broken. She's got that wit, and she's still got the bitterness, but she's not entertaining escape.
Yeah.
Also, the commander takes her up to a room to have sex with her, not as a part of the breeding arrangement.
Right.
But for his own pleasure.
For recreation.
Yeah. I learned a new word. Uvfred uses the word bathos to describe recreational sex with the commander. And I've heard the word pathos.
Pathos, yeah.
But bathos the definition is, especially in a work of literature, an effect of anticlimax created by an unintentional lapse in mood from the sublime to the trivial or ridiculous. She finally gets to have sex, and it's just total frustration of her sexual appetite. It's
right.
Exactly the opposite. That word bathos, I'm going to use that. That'll be my new transmute. Okay, so
wow.
Going back to the time before,
Holy
Uvfred...
smokes. All of this is rode back for me.
Oh, really?
Oh, my God.
Okay, interesting. Well, I have a very unconventional look at the book, Past Ordeal. I'm sure we'll butt heads there, too.
I'm scared.
In the time before, Uvfred and Luke go to check on Uvfred's mother, and they discover that she's missing. Her apartment is in disarray, as if it were the scene of a kidnapping, and they decide they have to get out of the country. And Uvfred laments the fact that they can't take the cat. And Luke says he'll take care of it, and she realizes he's going to kill the cat. And she says she says that's one of the things they do. They force you to kill. So that's the approach to their escape, which I think is the ordeal. The other Campbellian element, meeting with the goddess or mystical marriage. And there's a sort of twisted element of the mystical marriage here, which is the prevaganza, the group wedding.
Yeah. Oh my God, that was so bizarre.
You could also argue that it's part of Woman is Temptress because it certainly is a loss of innocence as these child brides are married off to wealthy, powerful men. So that's my take on the approach. The ordeal.
Wow. The first date with the commander in his study, this forbidden interaction with him is a one-on-one confrontation with the protagonist and their greatest foe. And because I feel like the commander, though he is kind to Uvfred, he is still the agent of oppression. He is still the symbol of the patriarchy in the home in which Uvfred lives.
Yeah, I get that.
He is her greatest local enemy, maybe like the level 1 boss. So this first interaction with the commander in his study, for me, I felt was an ordeal for Uvfred. The commander asks her to play Scrabble. They play a couple of games. She enjoys herself. And as she leaves, the commander asks her to kiss him.
Yeah.
She does so casually, though, very platonically. And the commander says, he expresses a little bit of disappointment and says,
"Oh, what a bastard.
I wanted you to do it like you meant it."
Yeah, you're not good enough. He's like, not only have you not born me a child yet, but you can't even kiss me right. Now I hate him. Now you're right. What a bastard.
He was hoping, this was his fantasy. His fantasy was that he was going to be nice to her. He was going to let her play games and read.
And she just fall all over
she would
him.
Fall for
you
him.
rich, powerful man. I'm so passionate about you.
Yeah.
Never mind that I've had literally everything that makes me a human being stripped away from me.
Right. But
I'm gonna go. I gotta go back to the enemy section.
But as her mother said,
he is absolutely the enemy. Now I'm angry.
As her mother said, people will become used to anything.
Yeah.
As long as there are consolations. Uvfred then accepts, as a result of this interaction with the commander, she changes her mind. She decides, okay, I'm going to not even consider what my real name is. I am now Uvfred. I'm going to make the best of this situation that I am in.
Crushing.
She gives up the possibility of escaping or anything like that. And she decides, I'm going to... What?
Go on. I don't know if I agree with that.
She recalls Aunt Lydia in the Red Center saying, men are sex machines.
Right.
Keep that in mind and use that against them. Manipulate them. Uvfred is then taking on the role of Campbell's woman as temptress for both Nick and the commander.
Interesting.
Now she is realizing how she can use her sexuality, which has been stripped from her at the Red Center. Now she's kind of like growing into it again and realizing this is the power that she can wield over her oppressors. And she begins thinking, what can I get in return for this?
So in your view, she's surrendered at this point.
She's surrendered to the idea of my best way out of this situation is to give birth to a child.
Interesting.
And so I'm going to do what I need to do in this house to make my situation as good as it can be while I'm here.
My argument against that is that this is her third and final chance and that she has no evidence that she's going to be able to bear a new child after 2 failed shots.
They go to the doctor every month.
Yeah.
The doctor tells her she's good, but because of the rules of the patriarchy, you do not incriminate the commander in the failure of a birth.
Right.
Of a pregnancy.
Very interesting. To me, here are the elements of the ordeal. At the Red Center, Moira overcomes Aunt Elizabeth, ties her up, and escapes. That is the clearest sense of ordeal at the Red Center because it creates a crisis for all the handmaids, even though it's not Uvfred taking the action. In the time before, while Uvfred and Luke are trying to escape into Canada, they get recognized by the border guards who capture them both and their daughter. Now, at the commander's house, you and I both agree that the commander's house is at least the main thrust of the narrative. So, Uvfred has her affair with Nick. She fakes the love that she's been so desperately wanting, and I think we're in agreement in this part, she simultaneously submits to becoming the patriarchy's vessel. This is just another possibility, a way for her to get pregnant.
Right.
But she also gets something out of it.
The television series makes that very clear.
Another part of the ordeal is the salvaging / particution. Uvfred is witness to what happens when women like her break the rules. As 2 handmaids, and one of them is probably Janine / Uvwarren, and 1 wife are hanged. And their crimes aren't revealed, which makes it their execution even more ominous.
Right.
Aunt Lydia even says, we've realized that by talking about the crimes, it excites people, so we're just not going to tell you what they did.
It encourages copycats.
Yeah. So now that the onlookers, the wives and the handmaids and the Marthas are riled up by the hangings, right? The partisecution happens, and a male criminal who supposedly raped and killed a pregnant woman is let loose in the crowd. The women just tear him apart. And the key moment here is that Glenn kicks him unconscious. It's like an act of mercy.
Right.
Because she believes he's not a rapist.
Yeah.
That there's through her connections.
Knows. He's not a rapist. He's a member of Mayday. He was discovered and arrested, and this is how they're executing him.
Interesting.
For the crime of being a member of Mayday.
Fair enough.
I didn't think that he's a member of Mayday and then also raped a handmaid. And so here's your execution.
I agree that we think he's innocent. I hadn't specifically identified or picked up on that he was definitely a member of Mayday, but that makes sense because that's why Glenn was trying to be merciful to him.
Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense.
Got it. Okay.
During this whole section, Fred just bears witness. She doesn't participate. She just tries to kind of get lost in the crowd. Afterward, though, she finds that she's both hungry and sexually aroused, and she's sort of terrified and dehumanized by this realization that she is not immune to the designed effects of this event. Fred goes to meet Glenn for shopping, but there's a new handmaid.
Dun, dun, dun.
Glenn too. Fred uses the password, Mayday, but the new girl doesn't respond as a member of the Resistance would. Instead, she warns Fred to clear her mind of such echoes.
Right.
And then she does tell Fred that Glenn saw the black van of the eyes coming for her, and she hanged herself.
Right.
So now
it was better.
The clear ally is gone. Again, this is all part of the ordeal as things spin tighter and tighter.
Wow.
Serena Joy confronts Fred about the lipstick on the commander's collar. She knows they've been breaking the rules. At that point, she assumes the eyes are coming for her, and she starts to consider suicide. The black van does come, but Nick comes to her door before she can decide to off herself and assures her it's Mayday, and they've come to help her escape. And the commander and Serena Joy look on as she gets in this van.
This is all ordeal?
Yep.
You don't out.
Yeah.
Reward.
/ seizing the sword.
Seizing the sword. So from my perspective of her ordeal being the first date with the commander, her decision to make the most of it, try to bear a child for the commander and his wife, I saw the reward as partially the awkward friendship that she and the commander share as a result of that first interaction. They have this odd relationship which grants her a little bit of power and freedom, neither of which she has had before. He lets her read something that is completely forbidden and is probably punishable by death. It's magazines at first, airport newsstand magazines. Yeah. And then he lets her read Dickens.
See, I thought allowing her to read Dickens was more of his psychological torture. Sorry. Sorry, Charles.
She states at one point that she's happier than she ever has been before. I interpreted that as in the house.
Yeah.
Not like ever.
Right.
She says at one point to him, I'm no longer a usable body. There's no romance really between them unless you're watching the television show.
Oh, did they make that?
In the novel, the commander is described as being on the older side. He's got silver...
little pot belly.
Silver hair. Serena Joy is older. She's a heavier woman who has to use a cane now. It's an elderly couple, I feel like, that she's living with. In the television show, it's Joseph Fiennes and Yvonne Strahovski.
Everyone's good looking in TV.
Yeah. So the commander is this attractive man, and he's very pleasant, and he's kind to her. And I feel like in the television show, if we were to do this hero's journey analysis, just using the television show,
there's some heat.
Absolutely, there's some potential romance there between Fred and the commander. During one of these interactions with the commander, he translates the Latin phrase that has been scrawled into the wall in her room. And as you've already stated, it's the very disappointing "Don't let the bastards grind you down," where she was hoping it was going to be some magical
password,
but still appropriate.
Yeah.
Now that I've said it out loud, that is a very flaccid reward.
Interesting choice of words. I'd like to defer my take on the reward for when we come back from our break. We will bring you Act 3.
This is now our 4th recorded episode.
Yeah.
We're calling it episode 3, but because we had an episode 0, and I regret that, absolutely.
As do I. It's
and
very
I fought you for it. I'm like, no, let's do an episode 0 because it'll be terrible. So here we are. This is our 4th episode.
Yeah.
You encouraged me to do this.
Yeah.
And I was terrified.
Yeah.
I refused the call to adventure. I said, no, I don't want to do it. I'm not going to be good on mic.
Right.
I don't have an analytical mind, and I think after 4 episodes, we're still seeing that yours far superior to mine so far, but I think mine's getting better.
I don't agree with that, but I understand what you mean.
I wanted to recognize you first as being the person who first had the idea for this show in the first place, and then has done the lion's share of the work.
Am I the mentor in this adventure?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you're my Obi-Wan. Mm-hmm. You've done, all of the administrative stuff of getting the show on the air even and getting it onto iTunes and whatnot. So anyway, I have a Christmas present for you.
Oh, man.
We're recording this on December 17th, although listeners aren't going to hear this until the end of January.
Right.
So forgive the time warp here, but we're reading The Handmaid's Tale, which is full of time warps, so it's applicable.
Yeah, this is the time before for all of you listening.
So here.
I got you Velcro.
That's very useful.
This is impeccably wrapped. One of the things about Dan is presentation is important to him, so it's...
I did wrap that myself, by
I
the
know,
way.
I can tell.
My wife wanted to wrap it. She loves wrapping gifts, but...
What'd you get me? Oh, yes, thank you so much. So what I'm holding in my hands is a DVD of Joseph Campbell, The Power of Myth. Bill Moyers did a series of interviews on PBS with Joseph Campbell before he died.
Yeah.
And that's what I've got in my hands. Thank you so much. What a beautiful gift. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I want to acknowledge you. Doing this podcast for me has been an adventure, and I'm delighted at how you've accepted the adventure and stepped up to the challenge. I think you underestimate yourself on a fairly consistent basis. And as I've heard from listeners, both friends and strangers, I don't think this podcast would exist without you. I think you are absolutely 50% of this experience. And I'm having a blast. I can't wait to do a bunch more episodes with you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Merry Christmas, Dad. I love you.
Hold me.
Hold me closer, dance on Santa. My wife came up with that. All right, Act 3. So I told you I would defer my reward until Act 3. I hope I don't offend you or blow your mind with this, but to me...
You've blown my mind this entire episode so far. Why stop now? Just do it.
Here's my take on the end of the story. So there is no reward here. There is no ultimate boon. In fact, in my opinion, there's not really a third act of this book. We're left with this historical notes section, a fictional transcript of a conference in which a future historian from Cambridge University talks about the finding of the text we've just read, which turns out to be a journal, kind of like a late 20th century Diary of Anne Frank. And it's grim because this future conference audience seems to find of Fred's story not horrifying or illuminating, but quaint and amusing. They're very condescending about it, as if such a thing could never happen in this future world utopia. And I think we as readers are meant to identify ourselves as the audience of this keynote.
Ooh.
I think it's designed to be a cold awakening that this sort of thing can happen in a civilized society, and that fear can create a vacuum in which fundamentalism can rise up and blot out the rational forces of democracy. I found this book difficult to process in terms of its mythical structure and hard to enjoy because of its narrative discontinuity, but it's clearly a significant work of art and social commentary. And in light of the current state of politics in the U.S., it's hard to imagine that The Handmaid's Tale has ever been more relevant than it is right now.
Yeah. Just the foresight of the producers of the television show to decide, hey, this is the time to do this.
Yeah.
So the prosecution rests? Are you done?
One of the things that makes this book so extraordinary is that it's an unfinished story, and she ended it on purpose.
Yeah.
And I wish I could have been sitting in that editor's office when she read the end of the book. But to me, the historical note is the third act, because you can have feelings strongly one way or the other, but the fact is we don't know what happens to Ufred when she gets in that van. She's either being taken by the eyes and Nick was an eye and he's lying to her.
Right.
Or he's part of Mayday and he's saved her. We don't know what happens to her. This is the last piece of evidence, is this journal that's found.
It's audio tapes.
Oh, that's right, audio tapes. So either she escapes to freedom, and that's the boon, or she goes down, and the cautionary tale is, 100 years later, 200 years later, whatever it is, I don't remember, things are better, and now we laugh it off. But history repeats. And here we are in the U.S. where there's this rise of fundamentalism, whatever side of the aisle you're on, where we're redefining our legal relationship to civil rights.
Yeah.
So reading that coda, that historical note, was very disturbing, but I don't think you could have ended the book better. Endings are tender to write. Real life ends randomly with death, in sleep, in car accidents, and people die. And that's the end of their story. There's no resolution. But narratives are artificial. And so when you're ending a story, you have to really pay attention to what you're leaving the reader with, because they're going to have to recover from that. They're going to take something from that. So you want it to be satisfying, but you also want it to be authentic. And I feel like there was no ending to Ufred's story that could be both satisfying and authentic. And that's why it ends where it ends, and we get the symposium.
Interesting. Yeah, the last line of Ufred's story is, "And so I step up into the darkness within, or else the light."
Yeah.
She doesn't know what she's walking into, but this is the one time in the book where she's taking charge of her own fate. However, what choice does she have?
Yeah. Well, I think her...
It's like her choice is not a choice at all, and that's what every choice that she's made throughout this book isn't really a choice at all. Nick says the commander wants to see you in his office. If she says no, what happens? Okay, so her fear is if I reject him, he sends me off to the colonies early and gets a new young, attractive handmaid.
Yeah.
Doesn't bother him at all.
The only leverage she has is that she might be able to produce a baby, which is good for everyone in that household.
Right.
That's the only power she has.
Yeah. In this society where the population has suffered such extreme rise in sterility and infant death.
It's interesting to think about if this kind of population crisis were to occur, there are 1,000 ways you could better deal with it than this, one of them being technology. But would that happen? Or would the already patriarchal lean of our Republican democracy with fundamentalist underpinnings just fall that way?
So what are you going to do when your wife comes home from work one day and says, all the women at her school were fired?
Probably escape to Canada.
Now that we've read The Handmaid's Tale, we know you do not wait.
But that's the thing, is what's the turning point? All I can say is...
At what point is it too late?
Should we have already left for Canada? I don't know.
Oh my goodness.
Do you have a different take on the third act that you want to lay out?
Oh, dude, my third act is your ordeal.
Interesting.
Everything that you mentioned as the ordeal, that long stretch of activity, that's my road back.
Okay.
Because now Offred has established this relationship with the commander. She's decided that she's going to do whatever she can to make the most of it where she is. She's more confident. She feels more human. She feels a little more sensual, a little more like a woman again. But now, having had this encounter with the commander and having had it go well, he invites her more. So this relationship is happening. Other avenues begin to open for her, but they're risky. Ufglen reveals herself to be a member of the underground resistance, Mayday, and she suggests that Ufred should join them. This shakes Ufred. She'd already decided, I'm going to do what I can with the commander, try to have a baby. Now Ufred is saying, or Ufglen is saying, here's this other option for you. The Mayday Resistance Group. You can get out, maybe. So this shakes Ufred. Serena Joy then shockingly suggests that the commander, her husband, might be sterile. This is a big no-no. You do not use that word in this society. It's always the woman's fault. And she suggests that Ufred try to get pregnant with Nick, and she'll even arrange it. And if she agrees to it, she will find a picture of Ufred's daughter.
Right.
And so to have this opportunity to see proof of life of her daughter, that shakes her as well. It's irresistible.
Yeah.
At the Preveganza, which is this mass wedding ceremony for the wives' daughters, arranged marriages, Glenn reveals that Warren's baby was a shredder after all, which reestablishes the risk that women who don't give birth to a viable child can be sent to the colonies and declared an unwoman. Glenn then also reveals that Mayday knows that Offred is seeing her commander in secret.
Mm-hmm.
How? The only person who knows that is Nick.
Right, so he must be part of Mayday.
Or is somebody else spying on her?
Cora.
Does somebody else
Rita.
know something? Is Nick ratting her out? Then the commander gives Offred a kind of lingerie outfit.
Right.
And asks if she'll go on a date with him outside the house. A big no-no.
Yeah.
Probably punishable by death for both of them if they were caught, except I'm pretty sure the commander would probably be able to talk his way out of it, but it would certainly spell instant doom for Offred, but she agrees to do it.
Right.
So while at Jezebel's, Offred spots Moira. Offred talks to Moira about how Moira ended up at Jezebel's. The last time she saw her was right before Moira escaped the Red Center.
Yeah.
And this was years ago. This is her third posting at a commander's house. At this meeting at Jezebel's, it is clear that Moira, her rebellious spirit is gone. So this is evidence of the power of this patriarchy. I was even shocked. I thought Moira was going to be the one who comes in at the end and pulls Offred out. So when we see her at Jezebel's, I thought, okay, here it is.
Yeah, so
finally Offred and Moira are reunited. Now they're going to make their grand escape.
I think you just keyed in on the key difference between your analysis and mine. You had an optimistic outlook on this book. Moira was going to save him. There's an arc in your analysis that Offred accomplishes something. And I think most of the book, she's just in the machinery of the patriarchy. She is a witness and she is a victim. And so my take that the story ends at the end of Act 2, or really not even at the end of Act 2, before there's any kind of reward, is a sense of that darkness, that pessimism. Whereas I think you were really trying to find some holistic sense of accomplishment in this book. But to me, when you read a story and it ends in oh, by the way, here's historical perspective, that's a signal from the author that the arc of the story is bigger than that character.
Also, during the discussion with Moira reveals that she saw Offred's mother in a film about the colonies, which tells Offred that this I don't need no man mother that she grew up with was broken.
Yeah, she faced the worst possible consequence.
Yeah.
She got caught.
Right. And this is proof of another consequence of not conforming to this patriarchy. Mm-hmm. And to cap off the trip to Jezebel's, you already discussed how the commander gets a room and is so disappointed that Offred is not excited about this opportunity for a free sexual encounter. Offred still fakes it. She then begins her affair with Nick, with Serena's blessing. So this is a huge risk that she's taking, especially because she still doesn't really know whether or not Nick is an eye.
He could be an eye who's willing to have sex with her and then turn her in.
Absolutely, he could. Yeah. And here's where it said she remembers her mother saying that people grow accustomed to anything if there are a few compensations.
Yeah.
And so these outings with the commander, the cigarette that Serena gives her, this relationship with Nick, these are all compensations that are given to Offred.
So this is
she begins to become complacent.
So this is all the road back.
This is all.
You?
Yes.
Okay.
This is all road back. Okay. So basically, what I was trying to illustrate through this, the walls begin closing in. The patriarchy, the rules of the patriarchy, and the consequences of breaking those rules are coming to light. Especially on her last shopping trip, when the new Glenn joins her, and the old one has committed suicide just before the eyes could take her.
Yeah. These are the fighters.
These are the vengeful forces.
Right.
So then Offred returns home, is confronted by Serena with the lipstick on the collar and the purple sequined outfit.
Yeah.
And she says, "You're going to suffer the same fate as the previous handmaid. Go to your room.
Wait, Serena Joy says you're going to suffer the previous...
The same consequence as the previous one.
She says that?
Yes.
Are we to understand that Serena Joy was the reason why the previous Ufred died?
Could be, because we know that the previous Ufred also had dates with the commander.
Right. I missed...
And that was discovered by Serena.
Interesting.
And bad stuff happened.
Right.
So either the previous Ufred...
She basically said, either you hang yourself
killed
or I'm
herself, or maybe what happened to Ufglen.
Interesting.
She killed herself because she saw the eyes coming together.
So there's more reason to be concerned that the black van is the legit eyes.
Yes, until Nick is escorting her down the stairs. Serena and the commander are there by the door, and Serena is outraged.
Yeah.
She's saying, what was her crime? Tell me what she did. And the commander is demanding a warrant.
Yeah.
That suggests that neither one of them called the eyes to come get Ufred.
Unless Serena's playing it soft in front of the commander.
I don't think she is. I don't think
That's
she
not
is.
the Serena Joy you've come to know.
Her reaction is she's angry.
Okay. So those are to your indications that this isn't the eyes.
That is the rescue from without.
Okay. Oh, that's good.
Nick is the rescue from without.
I think you have adeptly found places that match the third act. I think the difference between your analysis and mine is that I don't think there's any reward worth seizing that Ufred accomplishes until she escapes. I think Atwood intended us to see how dark and uncertain and fruitless her existence was, and that death or escape were the only two outs, and we don't know which she's about to face.
I think that when we are in a bad situation, humans are going to do whatever they can to make the best of it as long as it lasts.
I agree with that.
And I think that is what Ufred did.
I agree.
With her dalliances with the commander and with Nick. In that society, those weren't rewards to be seized, but they were the best rewards available. They gave her things that she was missing, which is a little bit of power, a little bit of knowledge, and a little bit of sexuality.
I don't disagree with that. But I think survival and freedom are two very different things. And all she ever has until she gets in that black van is survival. I mean, she gets enough food, whether it's psychic food or emotional food or literal food, to keep on going without killing herself. And that's all she gets. And so
sometimes that's all that you need.
No, I disagree. In this story, escape or death while trying to escape are the only acceptable ends. So any submission that she gave to the patriarchy could be viewed in one of two ways. One is a survival tactic. Two is a failure. I don't think you can call screwing Nick and dallying with the commander as any kind of a life. That's just like life in a concentration camp, totally devoid of agency or enjoyment. And so I appreciate the way you found places to, but I still think the big missing is there's no reward without death or escape for her.
I agree with you. But if you read memoirs of survivors of the concentration camps, it's all misery. And every now and then there's this little bright spot of one of them gets a bar of chocolate. And that is as much of a reward as they have. That's the one tiny little luxury that gets them through to the next day.
But to call that the ultimate boon is to sell short the fact that that person is a persecuted victim. Because having a bar of chocolate be a moment of pleasure is legitimate, but that's not the same as having freedom or agency, which we never see Ufred have until she steps into that van and question mark. And I think for the ending to be a zoom out to years and years in the future is a clear signal that Ufred's story didn't end. It was just the rest of it is unpublished. And that the real ending of the story is what we do with our interpretation of those events, which is, do we become more conscious of the way things are now in our own political landscape, or do we become like Nick and the commander and Luke and just sort of ride the wave?
Right.
Dark, man. It's dark.
At the end of the book, I had this very positive experience.
After the historical note?
Yeah, I think, and maybe this informed my entire analysis, but I think Ufred got in the van. It was a Mayday van. They got her to a safe house.
Okay, but
the audio tapes are found.
Okay, so that part isn't in the book, though. So
what do you mean?
She got in the van, the audio tapes were found. That's what we know. We don't know if she was drug off to be executed or if she was escaped to freedom. We don't know. The historical notes specifically indicate that there's no other record. So,
true.
If the author had wanted us to have this optimistic view or to have a pessimistic view that she was murdered, she would have included that in the script. So what I'm saying is, whether you assume that the best or the worst happened, the point is the last thing we get in this book is these cocky future intellectuals who are sort of chuckling at how quaint this whole backward society was. And that the clear message here is, these people don't believe history can repeat itself. Do you? I'm not arguing with you that Offred didn't achieve some small pleasures and that maybe she did survive. I'm just saying that we have to take what's there in the text, and what happens after Offred gets in the van is not in the text. That's where I'm standing.
Okay. Well, I am standing on that. While everything you said is true, I choose to believe that Offred escaped.
Okay. And I guess I'm saying it doesn't matter whether she escaped or not, because what matters is how effed up and persecuted she was before she escaped.
Yeah.
And that for every Offred that escapes, there are arguably thousands that don't.
Of Glenn's.
And this was kind of like a random, hey, let's pick this character and follow her story, because she's not particularly heroic or courageous.
She's not at all.
Moira's story or Offred's mother's story would have been a much more compelling swinging the flag Katniss Everdeen experience, but she chose Offred because Offred is not exceptional, and she's a more indicative example of what it was like to be in that time.
You're a pessimist. Offred lives. Handmaid's Tale Part 2. Coming soon.
Offred reunites with Luke. They rescue their daughter. They blow up the patriarchy.
I suggest that you make an effort to watch the TV series.
I look forward to
the Hulu series. Offred has a much more heroic path. She's much more of a defiant character, especially at the end of the first episode where, she says, "My name is June." Like, she's identifying herself. I'm not Offred. I'm June, and I'm getting out of here. Jeff.
Yeah. Oh, Dan.
That's it for this episode.
Oh, thank God.
That was a tough one.
Yikes.
What a piece of work The Handmaid's Tale is. Props to Margaret Atwood.
All props.
Holy smokes, that is a rough story.
I'm exhausted. I need another bottle of Cabernet Franco or whatever we just drank.
Join us next month when we will be discussing the 1995 feature film, The American President.
With a screenplay by Aaron Sorkin.
Aaron Sorkin.
Featuring
early Sorkin.
And featuring West Wing Weekly's Joshua Molina. Can't wait! Loves me some Molina. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And if you love what you heard, please leave a review. That makes a big difference, and it makes me not cry myself to sleep at night.
Thanks to Taylor Jordan for our amazing Hero's Journey fanfare and bumper music. Check him out at dramatics.net. That's dramatics with an X. And to Dean Ethington at DAE Design for our logo. Our logo.
Ooh, you're the one who misspoke this yime. Except I just said yime instead of time.
I quit. Wait, where's the bottle of wine? We gotta start this over. And we want to thank Habit Wine Company for this 2016 Habit Cabernet Franc.
The Handmaid's Tale is copyright 1986 by O.W. Toad Limited.
We are proud to be part of the 1888 Center family of podcasts. 1888 serves as a regional catalyst for the preservation, presentation, and promotion of cultural heritage and literary arts.
You can visit the center's cafe, gallery, and bookshop in historic downtown Orange, California, or online at 1888.center.
The next time you are visiting at the interwebs, please follow us on the Twitter at Heroes Podcast, like us on Facebook /Heroes Journey Podcast, and check out all our hilarious and informative show notes, including pictures of stuff that we did and things that we like at heroesjourneypodcast.com.
Until next time,
journey on. Wow.